This Fed Gov Today program is sponsored by KPMG. On this edition of Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose, the Coast Guard's new autonomy effort syncs up with the Pentagon, shoring up the supply chain for warfighting success, and the Big Four executive branch challenges for 2026. Welcome to Fed Gov Today in Washington, D.C., on YouTube and around the world on the American Forces Network. I'm Francis Rose. The Coast Guard will invest $350 million to remake its autonomous systems fleet. It will do that through a new office that aligns with the Pentagon's new portfolio management strategy. Anthony Antognoli is Program Executive Officer for Robotics and Autonomous Systems at the Coast Guard. Anthony, welcome. Thanks for joining me today. You're the first PEO of this new office. What's the genesis of it? How did you stand it up, and why did you stand it up?
So, Francis, first, thank you so much for having me. I'm incredibly excited to talk to you today. So Force Design 28 is the Coast Guard strategy for developing and transforming the service into more agile, capable, and responsible force. The Coast Guard faces an incredibly complex maritime environment. It is responsible for patrolling, for enforcing law, for responding to contingencies, and when the circumstances call for it, warfighting in an area that's 4.5 million nautical square miles. And when you expand that into the air above and the sea beneath the surface, that balloons into a volume of operational area that is stratospheric, literally. The Coast Guard has to do that with increasing demand, and very often has to do so with reduced resources, both fiscal and staffing. And the way that the Coast Guard is meeting that challenge is by the stand-up of the Robotics and Autonomous Systems portfolio. Please.
That boost that I mentioned is coming from the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. How is that going to change the way that you approach robotics and automation? You've been in that business for a long time, the Guard has.
That's correct. The stand-up of the ROS PEO will transform the way that the Coast Guard performs its operations across all 11 statutory missions. The RAS PEO is deploying capabilities from seafloor to space, and it will fundamentally transform the way the Coast Guard operates. It is arguably the biggest transformation of the Coast Guard since the advent of aviation.
What are the capabilities that Guardsmen will have as this office and the capabilities mature that they don't have today?
Wonderful. So underwater unmanned capabilities, surface capabilities. We've already expanded into unmanned aerial vehicles, those with AI and the ability to detect and not rely on humans to identify threats and those in distress. So integration of sensors across all platforms. It really is a dynamic constellation of sensors and software that expands the field of view for the operator, that extends the amount of time that we can be on scene, and provides much more decision space for operators.
You mentioned how this office and your mission aligns with Force Design 2028. How does it specifically do that? What are the tenets of Force Design 28 that your office and the capabilities that you'll deliver through it will deliver?
Probably the biggest is the fastest fielding of capability of the operator. For the first time in the Coast Guard's history, there is a single centralized and consolidated office to do the full lifecycle management, and that is from refinement of requirements to designing of prototyping around those requirements, initial fielding to capability, learning from the operator, informing the procurement that we, based on those the feedback from that prototyping, and then full lifecycle management. So the maintenance, the operation, the repair, all in a single central office.
I also mentioned how this aligns with the Pentagon's new portfolio management approach rather than the PEO office. You named it PEO, but as you and I talked about it before we went on the air, you're following that process that the Pentagon has just laid out pretty closely, it sounds like.
That's correct. That's a reflection of the foresight of Force Design 28 to shape our acquisition and lifecycle management structure after that the Department of War is heading towards, and that is deliberate. That is so that we operate jointly. Increasingly, the Department of War and the Department of Department of Homeland Security, the Coast Guard, have integrated operations, and it is critical that our sensors, our assets, are interoperable. Our design and our structure is such, and it's part of the reason why our assets and our sensors feed into the very same systems that the Department of War is using as well.
If you saw me scribbling while you were answering that question, I was scribbling down, integrate into the joint force as the reason that's the big driver behind correct. Why you're doing these things. Am I on the right track?
You are 100% on the right track. The protection of the border is a whole of government. The Coast Guard operates with CBP, so that's intra-departmental, but also, as you see, it's required. The maritime environment is also the responsibility of the Department of War. Clearly, Homeland Defense is also a shared mission between the Department of War and the Department of Homeland Security.
To that end, who are your greatest partners as you stand this office up and deliver the capabilities, I imagine, within the Department of Homeland Security, but also inside the Pentagon?
I would say really one of our biggest our partners is industry. Industry can innovate at a pace that the government just cannot replicate. Often industry shows us solutions to problems far before the government has designed a requirement. They are pushing the boundaries of what is capable long before the government has thought to ask the question. And there are countless examples of where commerce provided a solution that later the government decided and saw its applicability to its mission. So I would say within interagency, clearly we are operating jointly with the Department of Defense, but our biggest partner has got to be industry and academia.
To that end, this question maybe is a little more philosophical than tactical, but how do you evaluate innovation to decide it's going to meet the needs of the department, even though something might appear to give you capability that's really cool that might not necessarily be mission critical? That's
a great question. That is the reason and the design for iteration with operators. Often we see a problem, and the government is great at solving problems, not as great as seeing applicability for missions outside. And that is why we invite industry, we invite academia to come and explain ways that their systems could apply to our missions.
We have less than a minute left. How are you going to integrate the frontline operators into the work that you're doing so that you're giving them capabilities that will help them deliver missions?
It's a wonderful question. Part of and we've adapted our acquisition strategy to include operational use. In this next quarter, we are doing a fly-off of long-range UAS, and part of that, the way we are approaching that is data from those systems are going to be fed to operational command systems, and the operator will be able to feed back and provide a key part of the evaluation that will eventually lead to the procurement of these systems.
Anthony, it's great to have you on the program. Thank you very much for
Francis,
talking about
thank you so
office.
much.
You can read more about that new office and where it will invest on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, shoring up the supply chain for warfighting success. Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose. We'll be right back.
Innovation doesn't wait, and neither do we. At Maximus, we solve problems, streamlining operations, delivering solutions at speed and scale that drive measurable results. From strategy to execution, we simplify complexity, building trust through expertise and innovative technology. Every service, every time. Efficient government delivered. We don't follow innovation, we drive it. Maximus.
Welcome back. The Defense Logistics Agency says it'll add more resources to its campaign of learning in 2026. DLA says the goal is to, quote, promote a shared understanding of logistics and supply chain issues for the Pentagon. Doug Nobles, Managing Director for Federal Advisory at KPMG. He's former Director of Logistics Operations J3 at DLA. Doug, welcome. It's great to have you on the program. You talked recently about the concept of supply chain visibility. Mm-hmm. What's the definition of that term in a military context?
Thanks for that question, Francis. Thanks. Good morning, and it's great to be here. Thanks for the invitation. So when we think about supply chain visibility from a military logistics standpoint, it's having that ability to see all the way end to end across your supply chain, all the way to from your supplier, but even better, the supplier's suppliers, all the way down all the sub-tiers and everything, and then all the way forward to that ultimate customer, in this case, in the military case, to that warfighter that needs that requirement. And it's not just the thing that we're delivering them, but it's also all the elements that go into making that capability happen. So it's understanding the demands that are coming your way so you're prepared for them. It's understanding what inventory you have on the shelf, what is the capacity of your suppliers to make things, what are your transportation and storage options, and being able to take all of those elements of the supply chain and pull them together in an informed way so that then you can, the logistics planner or the supply chain planner can make intelligent, data-driven decisions about what options they need to exercise or what plans maybe they need to put in place to make sure that supply chain continues to flow through. And you mentioned in the intro DLA, so I don't think he'll mind if I steal a quote from him, but the DLA director, Lieutenant General Simmerly, when he first arrived, DLA is responsible for, they have a vast swath of requirement that they manage for all the military services, all the consumable items, uniforms, food, medicine, repair parts, fuel, you name it. And so when the director first started the job, he would go around and talk to the workforce and he would ask folks like, what's our most important commodity that we manage? And people would try and think about, is it fuel? Is it uniforms? Well, it's food. And you could kind of see how each one of those is the most important. And it was really, I think, a trick question, because he would say, no, it's data. The most important thing that we manage as an agency is the data of those supply chains. And so I think that kind of gets to that point of supply chain visibility and really the importance of it.
What's driving that? What's making data as a whole more impactful on all the areas of military operations instead of some of the things that you mentioned?
Sure. Well, military logistics is complex. That's not necessarily new. That's always been a very complex problem set. But I think what's new today is the environment that we face. So, in previous conflicts and previous operations, the United States, and still to this day, one of our great capabilities of the United States military is the capacity to generate and project and sustain forces all around the world. And no other nation could do that. But we can see, and our adversaries and potential adversaries can see, the power of that capability, and therefore they want to mitigate that. They want to try and deny us that. And so we can expect that in future operations, those supply chains could be attacked all the way back to from the factory to the foxhole and all along the way. And we can't take for granted that we'll have the ability to operate freely and flow our supplies and our sustainment wherever they need to support our forces. And so when you understand that challenge that that the environment will present, then from a supply chain visibility standpoint, you need your supply chain networks to be agile. You need to be resilient so you can adjust on the fly. You can make recoveries, or if you get disruptions, you can surge to other capabilities, and that's where the visibility enables that to happen.
Doug, we have less than a minute left. What lessons can the Pentagon learn from the private sector about all of these issues that you've described?
Great question. There is so much fundamental similarities in supply chain management that the private sector has to deal with. So the lessons of contested logistics, if you will, many of those can be equally applied or learned from what we saw in COVID disruptions or supply chain disruptions when there's port closures, or if there's impacts to shipping that are changing transportation delays, and all of those things where we see how commercial industries respond and assess the risk and mitigate it. Those are all lessons that the military can apply and learn in military logistics as well.
Doug, it's great to have you here. Thanks for being on the program.
Thanks so
today.
much. It's a pleasure to be here.
You can read more about supply chain visibility on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, the Big Four executive branch challenges for 2026. Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose continues in a moment.
One of the things that I always hear from my family members is, why do I have so many different portals? And why do I have to log into all of these different places to get information? That should be more easily accessible. And one of the ways that we can do that is by making sure that standards are the foundation of all of the systems that hospitals are using and providers are using and that we're using when we log in to access our own information.
Why is it that I can put a concert ticket in my virtual wallet, but I can't put my health insurance card in many cases? So how do we create ecosystems that sit with and alongside standards, but that even are implemented voluntarily through kind of initiatives that provide a space to develop those shared ways of working and kind of ways of collaborating?
Welcome back. 4 big challenges need attention in the executive branch in 2026. According to the Government Accountability Office, it lists federal disaster assistance, expediting cyber and critical infrastructure protections, the government's human capital challenges, and restructuring the Postal Service as the Big Four for 2026. Jessica Lucas-Judy's Director of Strategic Initiatives at GAO. Jessica, welcome back. It's great to have you on the program. Your now former boss, Gene Dodaro, outlined those 4 areas, kind of highlighting them from the high-risk list at testimony to Congress before the holidays. Why those 4 areas out of the 38 total that are on the high-risk list?
Yeah, really, I think he probably could have highlighted any number of them, but those 4 in particular are some of the ones that have the most direct impact on the public, or most visible. And as he described it, really, these are things that GAO uses as indicators, blinking lights, yellow or red, if you will. And it's important to get on top of them before they become a crisis. And so we wanted to really highlight federal disaster assistance. For example, that was one that GAO added to the high-risk list in 2025. Disasters are becoming more frequent, more intense. There were, I believe it was 27 different federal disasters in 2024 that had $1 billion or more in economic impact, in addition to, sadly causing hundreds of deaths. And it's very important that the federal government reform its response to make sure that it can better serve the public and help people who are in crisis and help them get the help that they need, whether that's in transportation or housing or healthcare or other areas.
We were talking before we went on the air. The high-risk list has been around since 1990, and federal disaster assistance is new on the list this year. Some of these others have been around for a long time. Some of the items on the high-risk list have been on it since 1990. What's the process by which you look at things that are going on in government? You look at every agency, you look at every aspect of agency operations over the course of a year. How do you determine that something is now bad enough that it needs to go on the list, or that it's done what it needed to do to recover and can come off?
Yes, we're looking for things that are at high risk of fraud, waste, abuse, or mismanagement, or they need significant reform. Things that, as I mentioned, have a big financial impact or an impact on the public. And we're looking at not just as something itself a risk, but how well is the government positioned to manage that risk, whether it's in the leadership, or the capacity of the agency, funding and resources and people to be able to address the area. How well is the government managing and monitoring progress and moving towards goals? And so we keep an eye on those as we do our work. And there aren't that many areas that have come off over time, but there have been some. And certainly addressing recommendations that GAO's made related to high-risk areas has resulted so far in more than $811 billion in financial benefits, as well as significant improvements in government services. So it's something that we think is very important.
Of the items that have come off the high-risk list over the years, are there common themes among what those organizations did, not just for the sake of coming off the list, but to solve the problems that resulted in them getting on the list in the first place?
A lot of it has to do with coordination, just making sure that there's good collaboration among the different stakeholders that are involved, a good communication with Congress and with the agencies that are affected, with the populations that they're serving, and better able to share information among the different entities that are involved to be able to address. Some of these are really, really big, complicated problems, and they require a whole of government approach. So we've outlined in our reports over the years practices that agencies can take and that Congress can take to help address some of these high-risk areas and some of our success stories that we've been able to share.
When you say a whole of government approach, do you mean an enterprise approach where everybody's working on something together? An example would be the enterprise-wide HR IT system that OPM is starting to work on. Or are you just talking about everybody at different agencies is kind of moving in the same direction, not necessarily connected to each other, but everybody's aware that whatever it is a problem and they're all working on it?
I would say probably both. We've got examples of both, and some of it is in data sharing and communication, sharing best practices and success stories and things like that. The disaster resilience or disaster relief area that we were talking about, that's one where 30 different federal agencies are involved. And it's important that those agencies be involved. They each have a role. It's evolved over time. But the result has been that it's, because it's so fragmented, as I said, it's really difficult for people who are trying to get services, get relief, to be able to know where to go. And so one of the suggestions that we've highlighted is to have a single portal for an application, so that regardless of the kind of assistance that somebody needs, they only have to go to one place to get it. And then it's on the part of the federal agencies that are involved to figure out who's best equipped to be able to serve that. Now that's only one option. There are others, including consolidating the response, that might help.
And your job, as you and your colleagues have told me many times over the years, is not to tell the agency how they should do it. It's to suggest this is the issue that, if solved, would result in better results. Do I have that right?
That's right. That's right.
All right. You've used the terms on this program and in other times that you've been on over the years: fragmentation, duplication, overlap. Overlap, I get. Fragmentation, you described a moment ago. Mm-hmm. Duplication's pretty straightforward too, isn't it? I mean, are all those terms as obvious as they appear to be?
They are, and they're not necessarily mutually exclusive, and it's not even always important to know that there's, this is overlap and this is duplication, but more we're focusing on the effect, right? What does this actually mean as far as the service that's being provided? Is it clear? Are there clear roles and responsibilities? Are there clear objectives? Does everyone know what it is that they're trying to do, what they're trying to achieve? And how to know when they're successful, how to know, when they've actually met the goal. And so those are some of the things that we really focus on, and the outcomes more than the actual mechanisms themselves.
I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation that this testimony was delivered to Congress about these 4 areas in particular by your now former boss, Gene Dodaro. The Comptroller General of the United States, his 15-year term expired at the end of December. What did Gene mean to your organization? I interviewed him a number of times, always learned from him. What what did he mean, and what does his not being there mean now that we're in January of 26?
I think he's left behind a really great legacy of leaders who are able to carry on the vision that he had for the organization. You know, we've talked about the high risk list. That was one of the things he was instrumental in helping to put in place, and it's work that we're going to continue. He was also very involved in another piece of the testimony that we were talking about with the nation's fiscal health, and making sure that the federal government is poised to be on a more sustainable fiscal path moving forward. So he was really able to bring together the breadth of knowledge from his years of service to really take a broad approach, you know, looking across the whole government. He had a great sense of the history, how we got where we were, and able to make connections among people and among different ideas. And so those are things that we're definitely going to be trying to carry on.
The only problem that I ever had in all the conversations that I had with Gene is that he was a Steelers fan. And after this weekend's game as a Ravens fan, I'm quite distraught, and I know he's quite happy. Final thought, Jessica, what do you look at as you prepare to do the next high-risk list in all of the work that you've done to think about what might have to join federal disaster assistance to go on next time?
Right. We're really going to be looking at what are the important things for Congress, you know, because we do time this in the new Congress coming in, and so we want to be able to help focus their attention on areas that we think are particularly in need of their concerted efforts. And so we'll be looking at progress that agencies have made in addressing the hundreds of recommendations that we have in each of these areas, and where there might be additional risks.
Jessica, it's great to have you on the program again. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Always a pleasure.
You can read more about the high-risk list on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. FedGov Today continues in just a moment. A sense of urgency is mounting for the Department of Defense to achieve a clean audit opinion by 2028. KPMG has a proven, scalable blueprint able to deliver clean audit opinions in the DoD. They don't let perfect become the enemy of the good. They design practical, effective, reliable solutions that put the mission and warfighters first. They start with a recognition of reality instead of utopian controls. That demonstrates accountability and ensures resource availability for the warfighter. KPMG takes advantage of every tool at its disposal. Its technology accelerators pave the way for artificial intelligence and machine learning. They're not afraid to be honest or ruthless. They'll identify and stop underperforming legacy technology. They know multitasking's required, and they're optimized for it. That ultimately supports the warfighter and strengthens national security. Together, KPMG can help you achieve and sustain a clean audit by 2028. Go ahead, get started. Welcome back. The revolutionary FAR overhaul of the federal acquisition regulations moving to phase 2 to open 2026, and GSA wants your input. You'll learn how from the senior procurement executive at GSA, Jeff Kosis, on the Fed Gov Today podcast this week. You get the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, on the Fed Gov Today YouTube channel, or anywhere else you get your shows, and you can listen anytime at fedgovtoday.com. The new Chief Information Officer at the Environmental Protection Agency says don't jump straight to AI to solve any problem. He'll explain why on Fed Gov Today TV next Sunday morning at 10:30. I'm Francis Rose. I'll see you then. Thanks for watching. Have a great week.